Thanks so much for joining us on Sights on the City today. We talked to City Council candidate Charlie Reece. Delighted to curate your city, Durham. This is my colleague and dear friend Justin Laidlaw, aka Buddy Rusky, asking lots of important questions about what matters for the future of your city. Follow us on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned for more interviews with City Council candidates and City Council members. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and our website, Clarion Content Media. We curate your city, Durham. Justin, I mean, we talk about how we sit around at the coffee shop and have these kind of conversations. I know you've got, a litany of these issues that we run through and talk about, and I think it's great that we can have the opportunity to engage.
And I think the other thing, when you talked about, one of the things that's important is economic development right now. I think Durham does a great job of bringing in high-skill, high-wage jobs that require advanced degrees and multiple years of experience. But in parts of our city where there's deeply entrenched poverty, those jobs aren't a direct benefit to those folks. We need to do a better job, and I think the city has a plan, we just need to make sure we implement it, of having a broader economic development plan that brings in not just those high-skilled jobs like, frankly, that our company brings in. We have our family business here in Durham, employs about 400 folks, and almost all of them are biostatisticians or folks who have training in statistics or running clinical trials. We do have some folks that don't have those layers of experience, so those are the kind of jobs I think we tend to focus on when we talk about economic development. But it's just as important, and in some parts of our city even more important, to bring in those entry-level jobs and jobs that entry-level folks can transition into to try to climb the ladder of economic success that really will make the biggest impact in places that need economic development.
Durham Tech has been a great, at least in my experience, place where things like that take place. And I don't know how often Durham Tech is, talk about places getting utilized. How often does Durham Tech get utilized as a place where economic development within families can happen? I was a student there. I got my associate's degree from Durham Tech. My mother went through a health information technology program there and now works for the VA hospital. And so, that has been, both her and I have directly benefited from that resource of, trying to get from this level to this level and to this level to this level. So how can we use resources that we already have to help promote that type of internal growth as opposed to trying to bring it in from outside?
Yeah, no, our community college system all across North Carolina is really an engine for economic advancement, much like our public schools. And Durham Tech does a great job doing that. I think one of the greatest things about Durham Tech is that they're really into these partnerships that they create with the City of Durham Workforce Development, Office for Workforce Development, with the state network that does that type of work, the county. There's a program called Made in Durham that the Durham Public Schools are just starting to implement. The superintendent wrote a piece about that about 6 months ago, where he talked about the Made in Durham program. And essentially it's designed to help kids in high school make sure they graduate, make sure they have, by the time they graduate, they have some real work experience through partnerships with private business here in Durham. But also that they go to some kind of post-secondary education and get some kind of certification that they can use to break into some of the more difficult to get into job opportunities. But I think the answer, to answer your question, is really two things. Number one, we have to make sure that we have enough resources put into those efforts to reach the folks that really need that help. Because your story that you talked about is a great example and needs to be held up as the kind of thing that Durham Tech, the City of Durham, the County of Durham can do more of. But also we need to make sure that folks know that those opportunities are out there.
Right.
And that's the tricky part. And one of the things that the city is doing a lot better than it has done in the past is going out into the community, like taking a mobile unit that has computers in it where people can go online and do job searches. That's the kind of thing the city's starting to do more of.
Yeah, we did not have that in
exactly.
public school when I was
but you know,
And
that's
even
just
if you
started.
go to the public library right now over on Main Street, you can see their computers are frequently overwhelmed with
Absolutely.
users who just don't have a home computer or don't have internet access. They're not there looking for a library book. They're looking for an online connection. And there is this battle between deploying the resources and having the resources. I don't know what Career Resource Center you were hearing about, but we were over for the police community relations conversation at the Holton Career Resource Center, and one of the commentators afterward just deplored how infrequently the youth in the neighborhood are in that place. And it's a nice place with a
That's
big...
probably Gwen Silver,
Right.
who's the person that I spoke to.
Right.
She's been
Crusading for that.
crusading to rejuvenate that particular resource in the community.
And it's a real tricky battle because I know the city spent good money on that. I mean,
Absolutely.
and it's a nice looking place. And, you know, when we were there were a ton of kids, you know, Latino kids, frankly, outside playing soccer, covering the soccer fields. But there were not many kids inside the building. And I don't have a good answer for how someone gets kids engaged in that way. And I feel like, much as I love Justin, in some ways he's more of an exception than a rule, you know, of what's happened. Like, and we hear over and over again about Durham having a suspension to prison kind of pipeline happening in our schools. And I mean, I'm not expecting you to have a magic bullet.
That's good. I really appreciate that. That's
but
good.
I wonder what we think about that whole trajectory as faced against, you know, our downtown's trajectory of going like this. Why is our public school system just kind of doing a lot of this? And is there hope that it's something different is gonna happen given the changes afoot in town generally?
Well, I think the Made in Durham effort, that public-private partnership, has the opportunity to be transformative for a lot of those kids. And I think the success of something like that depends on public investment, but also private involvement in making sure that our business leaders, through either the big Chamber of Commerce or also the Alt Chamber of Commerce and those types of organizations, understand there is a way to get engaged with kids in the public schools to help them understand the importance of going through this system and doing the things that I talked about, like getting your diploma or equivalents, about getting work experience, about getting some kind of certification. Those are the things that I think will help transform other families like yours has been transformed. And I think back to my family's experience. We would have loved to have gotten something like that. I mentioned earlier I'm a 10th generation North Carolinian, but my parents were 16 and 17 when I was born. But they went on to graduate from high school. They worked hard to support our family, often working 2 jobs to make ends meet. But my mom got some kind of certification from Forsyth Tech, which is in Winston-Salem, so that she could work in the medical imaging field at Bowman Gray School of Medicine. And that helped us kind of help climb the ladder so that I could go on to become the first person in my family to go to college. But I think that's the kind of story we need more of, and that's the kind of thing that I think our community college system and the kind of public-private partnershits that the city is deeply engaged in right now can do. But we need more energy, we need more focus on them, and we need more direct community involvement from the business community in particular to help kids see that there is a way forward that gives them access to a life of worth and accomplishment, because I think that's really important too.
Justin's on the spear point of some of that with American Underground and the effort
Oh, sure.
to really
American Underground is a big part of it.
Reach out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With that organization, and then many of the companies within that incubator space are actively involved in the public school system. I know we did a big crayons to calculators school resource drive within this space. So yeah, I think you're definitely right about the private-public partnership and how can we kind of activate some of those business owners to get more involved. Just speaking from experience, I know on that same Fayetteville corridor, one of the big hindrances for a lot of people, there are certain those walls that go up when you're trying to kind of make the climb from out of poverty. Education is just one small part of that, and so like Aaron said, with my experience maybe being an exception, I grew up in the Watts-Hillendale neighborhood. So, we didn't have nearly the crime problem that a kid in my position might have had in other neighborhoods in town. And so it's not just an education issue, it's not just a crime issue, it's kind of a whole palette of things that we have to address all at once for these types of transformations to happen. And I just wonder about that process. How do we make sure that these different entities, education, crime, business development, aren't working either against each other or
in isolation?
Yeah, right. How do we make sure that they're working in conjunction so that these, these transformations can take place for kids in the less affluent parts of town?
No, I think one way we do that is make sure that all of these efforts have deep community buy-in. Mm-hmm. And when you have the same folks from the community involved, not only in the youth outreach for crime prevention, but also economic development aspects and making sure that folks have access to health care through community resources. In many ways, the mayor's poverty reduction initiative shows a way forward in that, because that's a way that you can make sure that all of these different trains of thought and avenues of approach to get at some of these underlying problems are moving along at about the same pace. Mm-hmm. And what you've seen in that effort is a renewed attempt and really success at getting community activists who are in and of those communities involved in those efforts. And I think that's what it takes. Durham is great because we have so many different organizations and nonprofits, community organizations, who are working on issues that are critically important to our community. And I think just some base level coordination, like what the mayor's office has done with the Poverty Reduction Initiative, can really catalyze that kind of cross-pollination. But because I think the other thing that's great about Durham is that although government and business are really good at creating silos, I think our community organizations have been good at not doing that, at being open to a collaboration and other ideas and involvement. And that's something we've seen in the political activist space. Certainly, when I was on the board of the Durham People's Alliance, when the FADE Coalition came to us to ask us to add our voices to their call for police reforms, what we found is that they were able to bring the whole sort of cornucopia of different community organizations, not only PA, but also the Durham Committee, the NAACP, Southerners on New Ground, Spirit House, they brought the house basically to City Council, and we all kind of got behind FADE and said, this is what we need to do. That's the kind of thing we need more of. And I think historically, some of the political activist groups may have been more interested in kind of shooting elbows and trying to get out front and grab the mic and be on the front page of the paper or the news. But what that effort showed us is that we can actually get somewhere if we unite behind one vision. And that was the vision that was coming up very organically from the grassroots, from the communities that were deeply affected by racially disproportionate policies and practices, and say, this diminishes us as a community. We may not live in the neighborhoods where this happens, but it all matters. We're all in community together. Let's go and talk let's meet with the city manager. Let's talk to members of the city council. Let's address them in public hearings. Let's have press conferences where we all talk together about how important this is. That, I think, is the model forward. And that's what was one of the great things about that work we did last summer, is that wasn't the Durham People's Alliance trying to make change. It was the community coming together as a group of community organizations to try to make a difference in the life of Durham. And our success in that effort, I think, points the way forward in a lot of other areas. Mm-hmm. If we have the courage to sort of push down our own egos and not worry about who gets the credit, but really talk about
think about the end result.
Think about the end result, exactly. And look at what's best for our neighborhoods, our communities, our kids, making sure that kids see a path forward. Because I think ultimately, that, and not to come all the way around, but that's the reason why you see crime in some of these neighborhoods. It's not because of the breakdown of the family. I absolutely hate that excuse, because there have been single parents, there have been single moms forever, millennia. There's nothing new under the sun. Europe has the same problems, social problems that we do. The only difference is there are a metric ton more of guns in America than there are anywhere else in the world. That's why you have more shootings in America. There's The problem with that is there's very little the city can do from a public policy perspective to change that. The political system at the state and federal level is locked right now. If the massacre of elementary school kids doesn't change anything at Sandy Hook, then we're kind of locked in for a little while. But there are things we can do. There are public policy levers we can use here at the local level that can make a difference. But we have to do that in deep partnership, not only with these types of organizations, but also people that actually live in the communities that are being torn apart right now. You said crime is not necessarily on the rise, but it is. Over the last 6 months, through the first 6 months of the year, the most violent crime is up about 13.5% over last year. The chief of police talked about that a couple of weeks ago when he gave his report. There are a lot of reasons for that. This actually mirrors a trend all across the country where large cities are seeing a spike in violent crime. A lot of reasons being bandied about for it. But I think here in Durham, one of the things we absolutely have to do if we want to tackle that problem is we have to rebuild the level of trust between our police department and our community. And that's something we started working on last summer. We're going to have to continue to work on it. I went to the police academy graduation last month, and what I heard the leaders of our police department telling the cadets was exactly the message that needs to get out, which is that this is your community too. You have to get out of the car and start walking your beats to make real human connections with people, because that's how people are going to be comfortable coming to the police and talking to them about problems, maybe before someone gets shot or stabbed.
But that's got to be on the police leadership more than the cadets. And
yeah.